welcome to My Baking Journey, a podcast for bakers where you get to hear from some of the great minds in the baking industry. My name is Haf.
And my name is Rachel. I'm a baker. I know what it's like to be baking all day alone in my kitchen, experiencing the frustrations and struggles with no one else to guide or support me through it.
And I'm not a baker, but I've witnessed all the ups and downs that come with this industry and where it's hard to get a little bit of extra help.
So if you're looking for advice, tips, and amazing insight from various experienced bakers, you've come to the right place.
So let's give you a little insight into what's in store for you this week.
But I remember walking away from that and just thinking, wow, I did that. And the cake, it's like a 5-tier cake. It's actually standing, because if you come into this industry thinking you're never going to experience that, then I think the first time you do, and you will, it will knock you for 6, and you don't want that to happen. Every client out there is not my target audience. I don't want to make all the cakes for everyone in Nottingham because it's not the way I want to work. I want to have my target niche, and I want to work with clients who actually really appreciate my time and effort.
Thank you so much for coming on today on our show. We've been following you for a while. We love what you do, and we've been working with you for a while. But in getting some idea of you and your background and understanding, the type of baking journey that you've been on, for us, what we perceive is you have this ability to develop modern, elegant, very intricate baking designs. And I find that really interesting because I think a good place to start with you is if we go back a little bit. You had a 9-to-5 job, you had a career, and it didn't sound like that was something that you really wanted to do. So can you take us back to that time before you started baking in terms of what you were doing and what started this whole journey to begin with?
Sure. So I never really had a food background or anything like that. I was never really interested in cooking as such. It kind of came about when I was in London previously. That's where I grew up. I spent all my life down there, got married to my husband and moved to Nottingham. And that kind of started a new creative life in the sense that at the time I didn't have a job. I was looking around for something that was really quite fulfilling. And I literally moved from one job to another. And I just found that I wasn't happy in any environment. It always felt like there was something missing. And I couldn't quite pinpoint what it was. I had a fantastic job in London. I used to work as an immigration officer. And it's a really exciting job. Every day was so different. And I found it very hard to match that here in Nottingham. So after a while, I was working a particular job and I did a charity event, just providing some cupcakes. And the feedback I got from a lot of people attending the charity event was that they just loved the cupcake so much and the taste of it was just amazing. And that kind of got me quite excited. And I thought, well, if they love the taste of it, that really is 50% of what I need in order to run a business. I thought, right, if I can nail the taste, now I need to work on the way they look. And let's see if I can explore what we have in Nottingham. What kind of market is there? What do we not have? Can I explore a niche, or let's just have a look and see how saturated the market is? So the more I started looking around, the more I realized there were particular types of cakes that were being done up here, which is absolutely fine. There's a market for everything. But I felt like there was a bit of a gap in the market where there were perhaps younger couples who were looking to get married, who might want something quite modern, quite elegant, as you mentioned, and something just different they hadn't seen before. And that's really where I thought I'm going to start targeting and exploring this market and see if I can do anything with it. And that's really how Cakelicious Pops started. It started literally as me and my husband just sat down. We thought of a name and we just thought, right, we'll just give this a go and see how it goes. And I was still working at the time. The idea was just to do a bit on the side and see how it went. And yeah, I just started like that. And that's really how the business started, to be honest.
And where did that inspiration come from, Halima? Because you said that prior to that you had no interest in food or baking growing up. So to suddenly go and do a charity event and do these beautiful cupcakes that tasted absolutely delicious, and then to suddenly explore in the market, do you know what desire or drive or inspiration came from?
I would say the only desire is the fact that I have a sweet tooth. So I know what a good piece of cake should be like, I think, and I just like anything sweet and that looks pretty. So that's how it started. I just thought, well, if I can get the taste part nailed, the other part is to make it look nice. And let's have a look and see who else is providing cakes in the way that I want to. So I had a look at the local market and I felt there were some really wonderful cake makers, fantastic designs. I felt there was nothing modern in the way that I wanted to provide. So that's when I started looking at the market. I thought, right, now I want to start targeting young couples who are looking at potentially getting married, and let's see how that goes. But I had no prior experience of, what cakes taste like. I've never ordered from local companies. I just knew that when I went to a shop, if you have a good piece of cake, we all know what it tastes like. We don't want it to be dry. We don't want it to be lacking in flavour. So there will be some crucial components that I'm sure a lot of us can relate to. And that's really how it all started.
But so when you were growing up in London, did you come across certain shops where you always thought, wow, that's just amazing, those cakes are amazing, or those just taste really good, or I like the design? Or is it something where you've just always had an interest in contemporary design, something completely separate that you brought into your baking?
I think I've always been very creative, so I've always had that side to me. I was great at art. I love looking at anything which is contemporary. To me was really intriguing, anything structurally challenging. I just love stuff like that. In terms of baking and looking at cake shops, etc., no, I didn't really explore that much. I mean, I didn't really go outside that much in London, didn't explore as much as I possibly should have. But also the cake world was something that was a complete unknown to me. I had no idea there were so many different cake shops out there, so much variety, so much choice. So it really was a completely new world to me when I entered it. And I think going back obviously 20, 25 years when I was in London, it was a very different environment then. I was growing up, I was at college, university, my focus was not on trying to create my own business and become self-employed. It was simply a case of getting through every single day. And if you know what London is like, it's very much like a rat race. You literally wake up every morning, you go to work, you come home, and that's it. The day's over and done. You don't really stop to appreciate life. So I think moving up north has really kind of given me perspective and given me time to really stop and think, well, actually, what do I want from life? So I think that perspective was really helpful.
It's very cool. It's like you've been given an opportunity in that move to finally unlock some doors in your mind and figure out where to take that path. But starting a business and then starting a business in an industry which you haven't been trained on is, these are large hurdles to overcome. So is there a sense of naivety there where you just think to yourself, well, if I'm halfway there with the taste, surely I can do the other half in terms of the business structure? Or did you find it quite a bit harder to physically start a business?
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. Actually, it was a little bit naive because I thought it would be easy. And actually, it hasn't been too hard. But I think initially it was a case of, well, there are lots of people that I know who've learned everything from Google and YouTube, and I'll do the same, and that's exactly how I trained myself. I looked up tutorials for how to ice a cake, how to make ganache, for example, how to create a tiered cake structure. This is all done from watching tutorials. So I never went to any formal classes at that stage. And I just felt, if other people can self-train themselves, why can't I? So I guess I started with being a little bit naive. Then as I looked into it, the challenges that were presented were actually great, because every time I would do a cake, I was like, well, actually, if I was going to do that again, I think I would do that differently. So every single cake and every single order was a challenge in order to improve and become even better. And even 9 years down the line, I'm still the same. Whatever cake I make now, it's still right. If I'm going to do that again, I'm going to make it better by doing this. I know that people don't see that, but I do. So I'm quite self-critical with my work, which I think actually is helpful, because if you think you're at the top of your game, that's when you stop learning, you stop improving. I don't think in life really anyone can really be at that level. I think there constantly has to be an awareness of trends are changing, things out there in terms of cakes are becoming far more creative, and people want different things. So things do evolve over time. I think you have to learn and grow with that process. Otherwise, it's not going to be successful, in my opinion, anyway.
Become an obsession, Halima, because I'm looking at the standard of your cake and the exquisite intricacies of your flowers, of your, the standards of your macarons, the beauty of it. I mean, that doesn't happen overnight. I know it took me about 50 attempts to nail a macaron and get it right every single time. Mm-hmm. Was this something that consumed you to always be better? And how long do you think it took you to get to a standard where you felt comfortable as well?
That's a great question, actually, because it's actually stumped me, because I'm not sure how long it physically took me. What I would say was, with every cake, for example, I become better at icing a cake, and better at making my cakes straighter, the tops, the sides, the sharp edges, for example. Every flour would improve with every cake. So I'm not sure if I can put an exact time limit on it, but I feel with every new design I make, my work improves. I think it's a longer kind of process over a period of time, as opposed to 2 to 3 years, for example. But I would say the first 2 to 3 years when I came into the industry, it was very much a process of trying to work out where I am, and where I sit in this industry, because it was a very saturated market. There were lots of cake makers out there. In our local market especially, there are lots of people who like buttercream or fresh cream cakes, which I love the taste of. I think they're really nice. But I just felt with that particular medium, couldn't decorate my cakes intricately like I wanted to, because they have a limited shelf life. You can't leave them at room temperature for very long. So these things were a concern for me. And then I thought, if there are younger couples who are looking to get married and they potentially want to have a wedding cake and they want to have it sitting at room temperature for several hours, how can I adjust my cakes to make them appropriate for those clients? And so that's when I discovered ganache. I started discovering, the huge tiered cakes, and how to, like you said, create very intricate designs. What I found was no one up here that I was aware of at the time was doing intricate royal icing designs. The piping work wasn't there. Things like even macarons weren't being created. I mean, I went to several shops locally. I was very, very keen to try macarons because they just looked so dainty and pretty to me. But every single shop I went to, I actually felt really disappointed tasting the macarons. And I was like, these are really well-known shops. And I'm surprised they taste like that and people are still buying them. So to me, I was genuinely quite surprised by that. And I thought, well, I know macarons can be quite fiddly and they can be quite hard work, but I'm going to give it a try and I'm going to see how that goes. But really behind the scenes, we're talking 2 to 3 years it's taken me to get the macarons to where they are now. So it's not something, people might just see the finished product, after a couple of years, but really we know how much hard work and effort goes into making those macarons, and they can be so irritating at times.
I'm not the baker here on this call, but I remember, days where Rachel was testing and just it seemed like time and time again, it comes out of the oven, it's just not right. But you either stop and give up or you keep pushing through because you can do it. There is a point where you get to that stage and you feel like the confidence starts to build. But I also thought you mentioned something interesting. You highlighting young couples getting married as a core target market for your business. Was that the main one, or were you that specific that you had other groups to go after as well when you first started this out?
I think now that's where my business is being targeted, because I think that's where my niche is, and I think that's definitely where I feel like I can explore my creativity a lot. Aside from that, I do offer celebration cakes, and when I first started, they were a lot more basic, single tiers, quite simple designs, and often inspired by something that someone had seen online. They'd come to me with a cake, and I'm like, right, okay, let's do this cake. But it's always this case of, actually, I don't want to copy someone else's cake. I want to have my own unique spin on it. But it was difficult trying to gain that confidence from clients, because when you haven't been doing it for that long, they haven't necessarily seen your portfolio or range of designs. It's very hard to convince them that actually they should place 100% of confidence and trust in you. So I think with every cake I did, it was a case of, right, this is what I can do, but next time, let me show you how I can do it better. So that's what I was saying. I think with every cake design, it becomes, something, it's a process where you're improving yourself. And then it got to the point where actually I'd look at my Instagram or Facebook and I'd be like, oh, actually, I've got quite a nice range on there. I think, I can do okay. And it got to the point, I think at some point it switched where clients would come to me and say, look, we're having, for example, a Super Mario themed party, and these are the colours, and we would love for you to design a cake. And I said, well, what's the design? Oh, we don't mind, we'll just leave it all to you. And that was amazing when people say that to me, because I was like, they have that much confidence in me? That's really cool, And that's when I kind of felt to myself, but actually, I think I'm doing okay here. I felt quite confident. So it started with celebration cakes. And now I'd say a lot of the times it comes with wedding cakes. People will come to me with a particular design and they'll say, look, we love the idea of this, but they never say to me, we want this exact design. It's always a case of we've seen this design, we really like it. And I'll tell you another funny thing as well. When I first started, people would always send me pictures of other people's cakes, which was wonderful, really beautiful. And so many people whose cakes I really admired. I always thought to myself, I can't do justice to that, but I'll give it a go. But now it's got to the point where people actually send me cake designs and they're actually from my own page, which is actually really sweet. When people do that, you're like, oh, wow, they really like my designs that much. They want me to do my own design again, but I won't do the same design again. I will always change it in some way or try and suggest something different. Because for me, once I've done a design that's out there, I don't really want to be copying it again. The whole idea of being fresh and doing something different is to do something that people haven't seen before or something unique, particularly in the local market. So that's always been something really important for me to bear in mind.
Halima, can we talk about that first year and how you started to go about find customers? Because I started my business, it was a bit like, oh, okay, how do I start to market myself? How do I set price my work? How do I manage my timings from being overbooked to being underbooked? How did you find that first year and trying to find your groove into a certain rhythm on a weekly basis?
It was really hard, and because I was still working at the time. And although I had a passion, I did find that very difficult because I found that I had in my mind mentally, there are so many things that I saw on Pinterest and Instagram that I wanted to recreate. But obviously, I didn't have the client base for it. So it initially started with me just doing some cakes for a friend. I think the very, very first cake actually I did was for a very close friend of mine, and it was a Star Wars inspired cake. It was a single tier, quite a large tier, quite flat. And I remember she wanted the Darth Vader character. So I remember spending, bearing in mind that I had no experience of modeling or anything, literally days creating this one Darth Vader character. And by the end of it, I was so proud, but I was genuinely so exhausted. I was like, this is such hard work. I'm spending days and days, and the price I charged her was appalling. But at the time, I was like, I need to get my name out there. I need people to know what I do. So I did that. And then I remember within the first year or two, one of my very close friends from university also got married, and we were invited to the wedding. And I was saying this to my children actually very recently. That was my very first wedding cake that I did. And I remember approaching and saying, look, I would love to do your wedding cake. I won't charge you for it. But if you could perhaps just help out with some of the expenses, but I'd love to do a wedding cake for you. And how would you feel about that? And she went, fantastic. So in the end, we decided we would go for a 5-tier. Okay. It travelled all the way from Nottingham to London. It stayed in a hotel overnight. And then the following day, we set up at the venue before the guests arrived. And I mean, looking back now, a design I would ever do, because it was really beautiful, very plain white, blue and gold ribbons at the base, and lots of sugar butterflies cascading down the front. It was very pretty at the time, but it's not something that I would personally choose at this stage. But I remember walking away from that and just thinking, wow, I did that. And the cake is like a 5-tier cake. It's actually standing. And because we were there for the whole wedding, I remember I kept looking over the cake thinking, any minute it's going to topple over. I know it. Something's going to happen to it. I was so nervous. And all my university friends were there. And it's the shame. I just overthought the whole process. But it was amazing. And the cake was absolutely fine. My friend loved it. There were different flavors. And that's when I just thought to myself, do you know what? I think I can do this. So it's all those small moments, those small orders, those small moments of confidence that really inspired me to pursue this business and thought, you know what, I think I can do it.
Yeah. And then, of course, when you get to that point where you say to yourself, okay, I think I can do this, something comes along and tries to knock you down, right? It's a customer that just you can't work with. It's a bad baking day.
Yeah.
It's a sick child at the wrong time. Mm-hmm. How do you manage the down bits and, the struggles that you have to deal with, the ups and downs of running this business on your own?
Yeah.
What do you do to work your way through that and manage your way out of it so that you're back to the level B?
So I think it's actually a really important point to talk about because I've been doing this for 9 years now. And one thing I would have to say is that as with any business and any job, you're going to have up days and down days. You're not going to have 100% of clients who will love all of your work. It's just an unrealistic expectation. I think when I entered into the industry, I thought everyone's going to love me. They'll all know who I am, what I'm doing. And, whether they agree with my pricing structure or not, they will love my work. But what I have realized from default is actually no, because everyone comes to you with a different expectation. There are people who might have tried supermarket cakes, for example, or they might have tried cakes from other bakers or from, really well-known shops. And whether you like that cake or not, they might be used to that particular style, that taste, whether it's got the preservatives in there or not, whether it's made with a different medium. So when people come to you, in their minds, they have an idea of what they would like. So when you make a cake for them, you design it, you can go through the whole process, do the sketching and everything. And when they taste it, they might not be 100% happy with the way it turns out because it's different to what they expected. Not that you did anything wrong, you did things in the way that you would do correctly. But for some reason, the client might not be 100% happy or keen on that. So what I want to say was I think I don't want anyone to think that I haven't had any negative experiences. I have had them. It's really important to talk about them, because if you come into this industry thinking you're never going to experience that, then I think the first time you do, and you will, it will knock you for six, and you don't want that to happen. So the most important thing is, whenever you hear any criticism, look at it as constructive criticism first of all. Look at whether the customer is right or not. They might have a valid point in what they're saying. So some of the people mentioned to me that I use ganache, and some of my clients are not used to ganache. They prefer buttercream. So when I do make ganache, one of the first points I'll mention is, oh, we weren't so keen on the ganache. And I say, that's okay. But unfortunately, that's the medium, I prefer to use, and that's what I feel comfortable with. I don't feel like I can personally achieve that look without the ganache use, for example. So it's a case of, I need to know what works for me in my business, and I need to also understand that's not going to work for everyone out there. Having said that, there are so many of my clients who absolutely love what I do, and they come back to me year after year. I get lots of new clients who are attracted to my work, and they'll come over, and a lot of people talk about the professionalism behind their business as well. So it's not just about seeing a design and saying, well, actually, can you design me something? It's about staying in touch, kind of giving them a lot of your time and creativity, and giving them, the chance to explore different ideas, which I think might not necessarily happen with other bakers. A quick point I wanted to mention was, I've got a friend of mine who actually I met through Instagram, and I've always admired her work. She's absolutely amazing. And if she hears the podcast, she'll know who she is. She left the wedding cake industry to open up a cake shop in East London. And I went to see her a couple of years ago. Now, this is someone that I've admired for, I think, from the moment I joined Instagram. Absolutely love her work, because she's always been very creative. And actually, I think to a great extent, she inspired me. So I went to a cake shop, and we were just talking, having a chat about, it's just her family circumstance and the reason why, she opened up a cake shop. And I said to her, well, how are people finding it? And one of the things she said to me, bearing in mind, she's been a cake maker a lot longer than me, and she's got a massive following, and she's really, really good at what she does. What she said to me was, Halima, what I've realized about this industry is that people come in, and people always have their own expectations. So when they come in, for example, you'll always get the odd person here who'll say, oh, the cake's too sweet, there's not enough filling, the sponge wasn't quite what we expected. And what she said to me is, you just cannot please everyone. As long as you're working towards pleasing the majority of your clients, and also listening to anything that they say, which actually might be true, might have some ounce of truth in it, then you're doing the right thing. That's all you have to worry about. Don't kill yourself over a negative comment, because it's not worth it. It could just be that person's opinion. They might not even be right in what they're saying. So when I heard that from her, I thought, you know what? She's been doing this for so long, and if that's what she's saying, that's her experience, and this is fantastic. I can really learn from that. So coming back to the point, how do you get over that comment like that? I think if someone says something to you, first of all, listen to what they're saying, because there probably is some truth in there. Whether they find it too sweet or whatever, that's their opinion. But if the majority of your customers are happy with the cake, then don't worry about it. If someone says something to me, for example, like a cake's collapsed, or they've taken it home and en route something happened, then you have to think about your own processes that have taken place. Have you given the correct instructions about how to take a cake home, how to store it? Have you backed that up in writing anywhere? So all those small bits and pieces, think about how you can improve your business. Don't take it as a personal insult. Just think, well, they've given me some advice. Let's see if I can learn from that. And the next morning you wake up, you will feel better about it. As long as you deal with it in a constructive way, you speak to them, then you'll be absolutely fine. Just don't think that's it, it's the end all and be all. It can feel like that sometimes, but for me personally, I think the most important turning points in my business have actually been when people have given me criticism, because I've really used that to learn from and improve myself as a person and my business as well. So they're actually crucial turning points for me.
Brilliant advice, Halima.
One cake that you did for somebody, and she said that there was too much cream on it. And the first time you hear that sort of comment, and even I took it like, how can you say that? But then if you apply what you're saying to that, you do have to sort of stop and think, okay, well, did I do too much? Or is there a way to improve? But I struggle with that. And Rach can tell you how much somebody says something negative about our business or packaging, can get defensive naturally very quickly. And I'm trying to work to improve that, because I don't think that's the reaction. And it's far better to evaluate and see what you can improve.
Absolutely. It's a human reaction to be defensive. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think you've got to be careful about obviously what you say to a client. And I think initially my very first reaction was to be really apologetic. But actually, you have to sit down and actually listen to what the client's saying, because it might just be that this is their opinion. and it might not be the same as what you're thinking. So it's always a tactful way to speak to a client, obviously let them know. But I also know that every client out there is not my target audience. I don't want to make all the cakes for everyone in Nottingham because it's not the way I want to work. I want to have my target niche, and I want to work with clients who actually really appreciate my time and effort. And there is an openness about what's included in my cakes, how I make them, how I design them, the process that goes behind it. I think a lot of them do have that appreciation for the amount of effort. But that's taken time to build, though, because at the very beginning, I didn't give them as much time as I do nowadays. But I think as you start targeting a particular niche, then obviously that will naturally start to develop. And I think once you start advertising the kind of work you want to do on your social mediums, people will then start to become attracted to that style of work. So, for example, I don't like doing the semi-naked or rustic style cakes. It's just not my personal style. I think in all the 9 years, I think I've done it once, or perhaps twice. And I wasn't very keen on that design, only because I can't get my intricate details on there. It doesn't lend itself well to that particular cake style. Often using sugar flowers might not necessarily be the best thing. It just depends on the way it is. So when people ask me about them, I just say, I'm sorry, it's not the style that I offer. But because I don't show it on my page, no one inquires about it. They have this understanding that I just don't do them, which is great. So the more intricate, the more design, the more bespoke my cakes are, that's the inquiries I get, because people can see that's what I'm offering. So that's another thing I would say to anyone who wants to potentially target a particular audience. Even if it's just a case of creating display cakes, show them what you can do, then they will start inquiring.
Hey, sorry to interrupt, but I have to ask. You know you're about to go bake a cake, right? A really nice tall cake with some beautiful decorations on top, maybe some dried blooms, lovely toppers. What are you going to box that in when you give it to the customer? Please don't tell me you're going to have to put some extenders on and staple it to a standard box and then wrap the thing in plastic and give that to somebody, hoping for the best. I have a better idea. Why don't you look at OLBAA tall cake boxes? 14 or 20 inches tall, they're gorgeous and strong. You can put them together in just a minute. Just amazing. You'll find them a game changer as a baker. Check them out, www.olbaa.shop. All right, let's get back to the show.
What I'm hearing here, Halima, is a lot of it is built over time and building up that confidence in your own work, your own style, back into an understanding, is that a valid point, is it not? It's something that grows as you grow with your business, as your confidence grows, etc.
Absolutely. It's really hard to do well in a business if you don't have a passion for it. And that's a lot of it comes from a passion for me for eating something sweet. I love the sweets, the whole sugar aspect, behind cakes. But I think if you don't have confidence in what you're doing, and it's something that we hear a lot, people are not going to see that. So when you're talking about cakes, people often say to me, we can see you're really passionate about the flowers that you make, for example, or, the designs and the intricacy. And I'm like, because that's what I love to do. I love to show, I love to do actually what I think other people are not offering, because it gives me that niche. It's a sensible thing to do, unless you want to enter a market which is very saturated, but then you have to set yourself apart in a different way. And how else can you do it? If you're not going to do it in the design, it'll have to be in the number of cakes you do. It'll be in the price, for example. It will be in other ways. And that's perhaps I didn't want to take, because I felt that there were enough bakers doing similar things to that. And I just wanted to do it in the complete opposite way, because I felt no one was doing it. I think you have to have some kind of vision in mind and try and progress towards that vision.
You just touched on something that I know will resonate with a lot of bakers, and it's a topic that comes up quite a lot, which is on pricing and knowing how to price your cakes. I talk from experience of when I first started. I was a bit clueless about what to charge for my cakes. I started to add up the pricing of my ingredients, my time, and any kind of utilities I was using. And then I started to add on how many hours that may take me to make. And I was coming to a price where I thought like, I don't know whether the customer is going to pay for that price. And I know it's a struggle. And I know a lot of bakers don't publish their prices. It's a much discussion. And if anything, undercharge their pricing. And I believe that comes from buying your £10 cake from Tesco or Asda. And I just wanted to talk to you about your pricing journey and where that started. And do you feel like you're at a place where you feel comfortable with what you charge your cakes? Because they're extremely intricate, they're beautiful, And I have no doubt that this takes you absolutely hours to make a cake.
So it's really interesting because you're right. When I first came to the industry, I had no idea about the pricing either. I would just give out cakes, and they were very cheap at the time. But I thought I was doing okay. But I think that very first initial cake I made with that the Darth Vader, I realised very quickly that was taking me a very long time to make, and I need to be able to charge sufficiently in order to cover my time and costs. At the time, I was working, so I didn't think about it too much. But I think 2 or 3 years down the line, I was beginning to think, hang on, this isn't the target market I want, number one. But number two, I want people to really appreciate and value the amount of time and effort that's going into my work. So I think over the years, the pricing has gradually gone up as I've obviously become more aware of my costs. And also, it got to a point where I felt like I don't want to do cakes below a certain price because I feel as if perhaps they are looking for just a simple piece of cake, which is absolutely fine. People love just having a piece of cake. I love it when I want to have a really, really good piece of cake. I'll go to a shop and I'll buy some cake. There's nothing wrong with that. But I didn't want to target that market because there are plenty of people out there who are targeting it. For me, I wanted someone who wanted a piece of edible art. And that's where I think my thinking changed. I thought, if I want to target that market, the first thing I have to do is have a minimum price order. And the reason why I have that is because, quite frankly, I think with the amount of hard work, sketching, creativity, research that goes into any of my design work, I'm not willing to make a cake. I should turn my oven on for anything less than a minimum price because it doesn't seem sensible to me. And I also found that's a really good way of weeding out people who perhaps are not willing to pay that much. And as soon as they hear a minimum price, if they're not happy with it, they'll go elsewhere, which is actually fine. I prefer that. It really saves me a lot of time. So ever since I've had the minimum pricing structure, that's really helped attract the right client, I found. I often get inquiries from outside, from all over the UK as well. Even London, I have delivered cakes to there as well. And it's just a case of sometimes I get inquiries from much further away, from Nottingham as well, and it can be quite a lot of travelling. And even if the price is high, if the price isn't high enough to cover the amount of time and effort, and if I go off and it's the whole family going with me and we might go and perhaps spend a day up there, I just feel like overall it has to be worth it for you because it's not just a case of looking at your costs. It's looking at, for example, the electricity, the gas, the bills that you have to pay as well. You have to account for all of that. And aside from that, you've also got a personal side where you have a family, you might have children, you might have a partner. You have to give them time as well. You don't want to just be working 24/7. I think a lot of us are guilty of doing that at some point in our careers. And then you get to the burnout stage. And when you get to the burnout stage, you start to hate everything. The clients become a real nuisance. The inquiries that are coming through are so difficult to deal with. You just don't have time for anything because you've just become so overwhelmed. So I think I really learned how to step back and not allow myself to get to that position. So I have a limited time, so a limited sort of idea of how many cakes I want to do per week, and I'm going to take those on. And what you have to understand is if I'm obviously charging a minimum price for my cakes, I'm paying myself quite well, even though I'm not taking many orders. But again, that has taken time to get to that stage, and I obviously have to prove that I can do that from the work that I show. So you can get there. Just have confidence in yourself and don't shortchange yourself. That's what I would say.
You need to have the patience to give yourself the time to establish the business so that to the point where you can do what you're doing. Because I'm sure some of the listeners will be thinking about that, go, I dream of being able to charge minimum or being able to only do a certain number of cakes per week. But you shouldn't be skipped over that there's a lot of effort that's gone into that, not just in your skills, but in harnessing a certain part of the market to focus on, only doing certain types of cakes. It seems like several pieces of that puzzle that have to come into play so that you weed out the customer base that you don't want to work with and you attract the customer base that you do want to work with who find one way or another. So what you said is quite interesting. And I think it's a good time to ask you this because we're on the topic. And that is, you're a one-woman show in this, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of stuff you have to do. You have to buy your ingredients. You have to plan your admin. You have to source your, everything for the kitchen for the week, for your orders. You're obviously communicating with customers. You're cleaning up as you go along. You're baking. You're managing the household. So how do you manage it all?
I'm making flowers as well. Probably the most time-consuming part. Virtually every single cake I make always has like at least one flower, except for the one I'm doing this week, actually, which is actually for it's a male graduation cake. So no, I won't be doing any flowers for him. So this is what I was talking about in terms of managing your time. Because you have to be sensible about what you can and can't do. We're not superheroes. We can't take on every order that comes through the door. We have to learn to say no when you reach your limit and you can't do any more. As much as you might really love some of the clients, I've actually learned to realize that just because the client's really nice and really complimentary, if I'm fully booked, I'm still fully booked. And it's hard sometimes. It's actually, I think one of the hardest things I found is actually to say no to clients, especially when I think they just seem so nice. But them being nice doesn't make my life any easier when it comes to actually getting on with those orders. I've still got to get on with those orders. I've still got to do it and balance everything around me. So the key to all of that is planning. On the weekend, me and the kids and the husband, we all get together, we all do the housework together. We try and get everything done because I can't do it all by myself. And quite often on the weekends, it's my busiest period. You know, I'm delivering cakes, often going out of the city and other things as well. But I also found that, I think about a year or two ago, I realised that I found that I was just becoming too booked up in August. So there was one particular weekend, actually, possibly 2 years ago, when I had, I think it was 4 or 5 wedding cakes all on in one weekend. Now, they were all tiered wedding cakes. And I have a picture on my Instagram somewhere. I have to be going back a while. But I had something like 20 ganache tiers sitting on my tiny coffee table. And I remember taking a picture and thinking, oh, I'm so proud of this. But behind that picture was a whole plethora of stress, anxiety. I'm so exhausted. And I just remember looking at them, and I had these tiny tags on each individual cake to make sure that the right cake went out to the right client. And afterwards, when I looked at that picture, I just thought to myself, that was insane. Why would I do that? What was the reason? And my husband's always said to me, you know, you shouldn't do it for every single client. You shouldn't be so worried about the money aspect. Now, actually, I'm not. I just find it hard to say no to clients sometimes. So I've had a couple of those breaking points over the years, but they have made me realize that actually I'm taking on too much. And the funny thing is, you often don't realize that until you go through that experience. So when you reach that point in your career and you think, actually, it's really becoming too much, make a mental note of it. Go over to your diary, block out certain weekends. If you know the kids are at home, or if you know you're going away on a family holiday, you know family are coming over, physically go over to your diary, block it out. And when someone makes an inquiry, just learn to say no. It's such a simple word, but you have to learn to say that if that client really loves you and your work, they will be back. They will come back to you for the next celebration. And in the first few years, I used to make a lot of excuses for my clients that, you know, oh, well, they've forgotten, you know, their son's birthday was coming up, or, you know, they booked late for a wedding. It's not their fault. You know, they just didn't get around to contacting all the suppliers. But now I'm thinking, well, actually, if you really do like this person so much, you will contact them first. And it's funny because I've actually had, on a couple of occasions recently, I've had a couple of brides contact me and say, even before we've secured the venue, we just want to check, are you available on this date? Which was amazing, because they're like, we know the venue's available for this date, and we want to make sure you're available first, and we'll book you in, and then we'll contact the venue. And that has been amazing to hear. And it was such a confidence boost for me, because I thought, now that is a client I want to work with, because they really value everything I'm putting into that cake design and that order. So that's really the target market, I think. Yeah. You know, if we can all reach that, that would be amazing, because it would give you a lot of job satisfaction and fulfillment.
Do you take time out for yourself, though, in terms of like finding inspiration and like what kind of inspiration you know, where do you go for that inspiration? Or do you make that a part of the process in terms of researching the customer brief?
I think it always has to be a part of the process, because a lot of my contacts won't contact me 6 months or a year in advance. I often get 2 to 3 months, and I'm lucky to get that much, to be honest. Often it's just the client base that I work with tends to be a lot shorter notice. So what I find is I'm constantly browsing through Pinterest, you know, Instagram. And if I find something that I like, I will save it. And I won't save it to copy, but I'll be like, oh, I love that flower placement. I love the colours that we use there. Or I love the way the structure of those cake tiers. I think they're really attractive. And I'll try and repeat that in a design, but obviously completely change the whole thing and make it my own. So it's elements of things I love. And I often do this. I have a separate folder called Cake Inspo on Instagram, and I'll save everything on there. So when a client contacts me, it's often the case that they'll give me a colour scheme and say, we would love for you to do whatever you think would look nice. And I'll go to my cake inspiration folder and say, well, what jumps out at me in terms of this cake and this design and what the client wants. And there'll often be different elements. Like, I love those flowers, and actually I love that. And then I try to put them all together and then try to match it to what the client wants and what their Pinterest board is and what their mood board is for the wedding. So it often does come together as I'm doing my research and such. But there are times, for example, traditionally over the winter months, it's been quieter. So that's been a time where I've often had the time to sit down and do some display cakes. And I love doing those because that's where my creativity really comes out. I feel like if there's something that I'm itching to do, I would love to just try it out on a display cake and then show it on my page. And again, that's showing potential customers out there what I can do, what I can achieve. So yeah, I would say if I have the time, it generally comes through the winter months. But if not, then yeah, it's more of an ongoing process. It's very hard to schedule some time out for to try and gain some inspo.
Very true. You did the arc cake recently. Was this an idea of a display cake to go do?
It was actually inspired. So there's a really lovely company from called Copper Fort Cakes, and she's been doing the art style cake that's been trending for a long time. And I've always wanted to do it, but on one or two occasions when I've suggested to the client, they haven't been so keen. So it's a case of trying to find the right client sometimes for the right idea. And when this client requested this particular design, I just thought I'll suggest her and see what she said. I could just picture how it would look with all the animals, you know, and the balloon arch. So the balloon arch was again something that I saw on an inspiration picture from one of these fantastic balloon stylists. And I just remember seeing one in very similar colours actually with the huge clouds in the end. And I just thought, I'd love to recreate that on one of my cakes. So I saved that. Then I saved the arch cake in a separate image. And then obviously the client contacted me and she had a very nude, kind of neutral kind of theme. I just thought, you know what? I think those elements would work really well together. So I think when I suggested that to her, she was just straight away, she was like, look, Halima, whatever you want to do, just go for it. You know, I completely trust you. And it was amazing to hear that from a client that actually I'd never spoken to. She'd never met me. She didn't have any personal referrals for either. She literally came across my work. And she was just like, she said, literally saw how many followers you had. And I just thought, she'll never respond to me. And she said, when I messaged you, you responded to me like that same evening. And I was shocked. She said, I never expected that. I said, well, you know, there is a human behind this account. You know, there's no reason why I wouldn't respond. I want those orders as much as you do. And yeah, we just took it from there. It was fantastic. It went really, really well. And she was over the moon with it. So yeah, it was very successful in the end.
It's great advice, Halima, to be saving and searching for images as you go along, not just when a customer gets in touch. It's that's great advice for our listeners. I love to hear something like that. I know I do something very similar. I do as I go through Instagram in particular. For me, I love to go along. I think, maybe that style of cake in few weeks' time, or if it's a nice summery cake, or it's a really nice autumn cake, or the design.
I mean, that's why we have a save option on Instagram. It's great because you can save those ideas, but it's also really hard to find the right inspiration under pressure.
Yeah.
So when a client's asking for something and, you know, you're on a timer and, you know, they're waiting for you and you've got 1,000 other things to do, it's really hard to then look for ideas in that theme. But I think, I've been on Instagram for long enough, so when someone asks me for a particular style, I often know which pages to go to because they will be showcasing similar styles. So obviously when you've been doing it for as long as I have, you can do that. But yeah, I mean, saving is always a great idea because you can always go to that folder and have a look. And, you know, it's always great to be inspired by not just other people's work, but I find a lot of the time things like fashion inspires me, patterns, interior designs. There are so many different pages. I don't just follow cake pages. I actually find the best inspiration comes from non-cake related pages.
How do you manage the social media though? I mean, how do you find it?
It's so hard. I find it exhausting. I often wish I could employ someone just to answer the inquiries because it can be a job and a half in itself. I feel, you know, there's just so much going on and you have to be careful about managing the content, managing the comments. You want to try and come across as being responsive to people. But I think it is increasingly becoming difficult. So I think scheduling time out to do that is really important. If you can, even if it's just like an hour or so a day, just so you can respond to people's comments, like their comments and deal with inquiries. But I think moving forward, trying to find a way which works for you. So I am now looking at creating a website of my own, looking at a complete rebrand soon as well. Simply because I think when Cakelicious Pops started, I didn't really take it very seriously. I never thought it would take off in the way that it has. And even the name that we came up with was a bit off the cuff. And we just thought, my husband suggested a name. I just thought, that sounds okay. And we just went ahead. And now 9 years later, I mean, it's amazing to think where it's got me. So I'm really proud of it from that aspect. But it really, now when I look at it, it doesn't reflect what I do. So that's why I think a rebrand is in order. So hopefully I'll be creating a website and that'll be going live soon. And that will help me, I think, a great deal, because it means all of my inquiries will be managed from one particular base, which will be the website.
Yeah.
Which I'm really looking forward to, because using Instagram, Facebook, the WhatsApp inquiries and email, it's really exhausting. It's hard work.
Right. Well, so listen, thank you for all that. We are coming up to about the end of our time here, but we would like to finish off with a bit of a tradition that we're going to do.
Oh.
And it's a bit of a quick fire round of questions. There's only 4, but
okay.
I'm going to start and just give us your answer, and you don't have to explain it, and we'll just go on to the next one. So first one is, and I think we already know the answer to this, American buttercream, Swiss meringue buttercream, or ganache?
Swiss all the way. For the filling, but for the outside, ganache.
Ganache for the outside. Okay, got it.
One aspect of baking you won't compromise on.
The finish.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Do you have a baking book from your bookshelf you'd like to share?
The Hummingbird Bakery is excellent.
Ooh,
love their work.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. All right. Last one.
Who would you want to make your next birthday cake?
Oh my gosh. That's such an interesting question.
Probably not the husband.
No, he hasn't got a clue. I think possibly this friend of mine that I was talking to you about, the one who has shop in East London. I think possibly her. She's not famous as in worldwide famous, but I think she's amazing because she's always been an inspiration to me. And I just think I tasted her cakes. They were incredible. They were amazing. So I think we'll have to pop to London to order a birthday cake from her.
Halima, would you like to share her name so we can all go to East London and try these delicious cakes?
Jamila from Sweet Julie's. She's based in East London. Absolutely amazing.
All right.
That's where I'll be going this weekend then.
You better try. Definitely.
Listen, Halima, thank you so much. Honestly, that was really informative, and you gave a lot of interesting comments and stories on that. So we really enjoyed it. I hope you did too.
Thank you very much for your time and for inviting me. This has been an amazing experience and I really enjoyed it.
All right, great.
How?
So what was that? How did you think? It was the first call with Halima.
Do you know what? I've been following Halima for 4 or 5 years now, and her work is just absolutely exquisite, and it is works of art. And it was a real honour to just have that time to understand her journey. And I thought she brought about so many pearls of wisdom about managing your time, finding your target audience, learning how to price your cakes. I think it's just invaluable for anyone that's listening, but it's skills that could take away from if you're in the baking community or if you're doing something completely different. I thought there was pearls of wisdom there that transfer across industries.
Sure. I mean, she's very consistent in the way she approaches things, how she talks about it, and then working her way out of that negativity that she might run into to work. I mean, because she's been going 9 years now, so it's not like this is a new thing for her. So she's gone through a lot of the hard stuff. And while she'll still run into it today, it's not as much because she's in far more control, I think, of her business. So, I thought that was just really, really interesting.
Yeah, a fascinating chat. And I can't wait to go check out that bakery in East London.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, that's cool. Well, anyway, I hope you all enjoyed that. So look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks. See you later.
And that wraps up episode 3 of My Baking Journey. Hope you enjoyed that one. Check the show notes to learn more about Halima and check out some of her absolutely incredible cakes. We're back next Monday with our next episode. But before we let you go, I just want to remind you, this podcast is brought to you by OLBAA. Who is OLBAA? Packaging for bakers, designed by a baker. You can check out OLBAA at www.olbaa.shop. Take care.